Within storytelling, the broad idea of a magic system or magic systems refers to the concept that in-universe powers will abide by a certain set of rules or logic. In stories typically told within the action shonen genre, you're more likely to hear the term power system, though the difference between these two concepts is negligible at best. Depending on who you ask, the idea of a power system is that it'll be a little more focused on superpowers in combat than a magic system, which might focus on more generalized concepts within a narrative universe. Although even this distinction is messy at best and filled with outliers. Today, I'd like to discuss some thoughts I have about certain power systems in some of my favorite stories, and how they specifically portray the idea of supernatural abilities deriving themselves from a sort of energy or life force that people give off. Within the universe of Hunter x Hunter, people passively radiate this energy called aura, and the art of manipulating that aura is referred to as Nen. The foundations of Nen are built upon four fundamental concepts: Ten, Zetsu, Ren, and Hatsu. Due to most people being unaware of the aura their body passively generates, the first step of Nen involves Ten, actively containing the Nen surrounding your body, or learning to consciously control its flow. Zetsu is actively shutting off the nodes that generate aura from your body, concealing your aura presence, or in essence, learning that there's an off switch and turning your Nen off, leaving you vulnerable to Nen-based attacks, and things like Ren projected with hostility. Ren being the fundamental that allows somebody to draw more aura from their body and or project it with some form of intent. And Hatsu is taking everything you've learned before and applying that to your own way of controlling Nen, which generally slides into 1 or 2 affinities out of 6. Every person is born generally more proficient in one specific affinity, but that can change with time as they become more proficient in other affinities, and some people even lean towards 2 affinities or exist between them instead of just the one. The most interesting thing to me about Nen, especially going into Hunter x Hunter after starting out with series like Jujutsu Kaisen that present the idea of people being born with a specific supernatural ability powered by an energy their body passively generates, it's mainly the fact that Nen is a much more conscious way of contextualizing how people end up at the supernatural abilities associated with them. I've always found it a little stuffy and almost nearsighted to present the idea that people are born with a specific superpower that represents them, and that's it. With the way that a lot of these supernatural abilities exist to convey ideas about a character, the unflinching nature of their specific supernatural ability starts to become really stuffy feeling when they go through major character development, enough to where the original traits that their supernatural ability was conveying don't really apply to them anymore. Nen, meanwhile, sort of treats the idea of conjuring a supernatural ability like an extension of the self, in defining the roots of what Nen is as a conscious manifestation and manipulation of supernatural life force energy. Nen is essentially refuting the idea that there is an unchanging, permanent idea of the self, which in a sense also refutes the idea that a superpower needs to be an unchanging reflection of the self. And, above all, I just think it's really interesting that Hunter x Hunter's power system allows supernatural abilities that characters use to be fluid, just like the characters and their morals themselves are. Kagurabachi's power system bases itself on the idea of spirit energy, which is a life force that people passively radiate, similar to aura in Hunter x Hunter. Although what that spiritual energy is used towards isn't to power a subset of fundamentals that you use to craft your own ability, but rather simply empowering one ability that you are born with, closer to something like quirks in My Hero Academia or curse techniques in Jujutsu Kaisen. The act of manipulating one's spiritual energy to conjure forth some supernatural result is called sorcery. Sorcerers in Kagurabachi need to train their spiritual energy output similar to a muscle. The result of said training being able to do things like sustaining use of your ability for longer and longer periods of time. Kagurabachi's power system does the job as far as getting across why characters have specific supernatural abilities, but where it's only just passable in my eyes is a lack of fluidity afforded to characters. characters, though this is absolutely made less of an issue because of the reason I am bringing it up, which is the Enchanted Blades made by Kunishigi Rokuhira. The Enchanted Blades are a set of 6 katana made by the main character's father in Kagurabachi. Said katana were used to win a war that happened 18 years before the story occurred. The enchanted blades are manufactured with a special substance called the Datinseki. When somebody flows their spiritual energy into this substance, the substance amplifies it back 3 times and reflects it towards the person who put the energy in. Normally, this results in people blowing the fuck up because they can't handle the sheer energy being thrown back at them. Somehow, though, Kunishigi Rokuhira was able to stabilize the Datinseki and make it basically a battery for spiritual energy and almost like a conduit or a filter for said spiritual energy to be manipulated and changed into a different form as it flows through. There are many a reason I find the Enchanted Blades of Kagurabachi so interesting, mainly their plot relevance, as well as their general simplistic trend of being based on some central symbol, which explains the 3 central abilities it has. It's one thing for the logic of a power system in an action shonen to allow 4 supernaturally enhanced objects, like cursed objects from Jujutsu Kaisen, or Nen being imbued within objects in Hunter x Hunter. It's another, though, to present the idea of magic like a power for the technology of something else. It's just really interesting to me how the enchanted blades within Kagurabachi are treated almost like magical nukes, and how the enchanted blades themselves have a kind of different or adjacent set of logic to straight up sorcery. Like noting how before I didn't say that war that happened 18 years before the story was one with magic, it was one with these magic swords specifically. This sort of change in typical power system hierarchies by having magic imbued objects be stronger than the magic, plus the quote unquote idea of the true realm where a person wielding an enchanted blade can influence and change its ability set based off of their own desires, leads to Kagurabachi's power systems feeling a lot more flexible than you'd expect with how the base ideas are presented. And you know, power systems are cool, katana are cool, mixing a power system and katana are cool, and making those magic katana an allegory for atomic power is pretty interesting in its own right. Within One Piece, there is a power system that you could say has been alluded to since the very first chapter of the series, separate from the power system most people know One Piece for, which is devil fruits. Haki, which is written as ambition in Japanese, acts not only as a power system manifestation of the base themes expressed within One Piece, but as an umbrella term of sorts for many supernatural abilities that went unexplained for a long period of time. Officially, Haki is split into 3 types: Observation Haki, Armament Haki, and Conqueror's Haki. Armament Haki is taking Haki that your body generates and coating either an object or your skin in it to increase its durability and act generally as an invisible shield of sorts. Observation Haki refers to the idea of foresight and being able to detect something fundamental that isn't visual, like somebody's emotions or the signature of somebody's soul, and if strong enough, can even be used to straight up see into the future. And Conqueror's Haki? It's like an electromagnetic pulse, but for consciousness. If somebody uses a burst of Conqueror's Haki, anybody whose will or ambition is weak enough will basically be unable to stay conscious because of that burst. This is, I think, the most nebulous power system concept for me to bring up within a video about quote-unquote life-based power systems, by nature of Haki as a concept deriving itself from whether or not a person has the ambition to realize some sort of supernatural influence. I guess in my head though, with how much the story of One Piece emphasizes freedom as a concept and the chasing of freedom or one's personal interests as the reason to live, it just makes sense to me at least that Haki would still classify as a life-based power system by nature of the very ambition that births the energy form of Haki being a byproduct of people living their lives and chasing things as they should within the One Piece universe. The idea of Haki being a subset of supernatural abilities that somebody can manifest through sheer ambition is like the second or third cousin removed idea of straight up generating a supernatural energy because you are alive. Behind all these power systems are the cultural idea of ki or chi, which is like a breath that exists within all living things. That isn't a literal breath, but like a metaphysical energy of sorts. You could argue one way or another that Haki is or isn't representative of this fundamental idea of ki/chi that a lot of action shonen or general action shonen adjacent stories rely on for the basis of their power systems. I would like to imagine, at least though, that Haki is like a crossroads between the breath of the soul and the breath of the mind, and that when these two meet, you get what is necessary to animate the body and realize the self, or in essence, what One Piece considers the idea of being alive to be. So, about the powers that actually qualify under Haki. With Armament Haki, the wielder is generating enough Haki or ambition to essentially coat their body in like a extra durable layer of invisible something. Armament Haki is definitely the most simple branch of Haki to understand, and I think it's the most straightforward to visually convey too. What else is more straightforwardly cool than the idea of, whoa, that guy is so ambitious, it's like your punch just rolled off him, because he had like a 2-inch thick invisible shield covering the whole part of his body. Observation Haki, despite seeming pretty straightforward with the fact that it's basically just foresight, is actually pretty vague in how it's described, to which I think that vagueness is a benefit of Observation Haki, not necessarily a downside of it. This vagueness allows for Observation Haki to be anything between being able to read somebody's emotions on a more fundamental level, or being able to see several days, months, or even years into the future. Observation Haki has always been very much, you'll know it if you see it and how it's portrayed, and I think that extends in part to how we've seen certain things that are probably Observation Haki, but the story hasn't really gone out of its way to clarify if they are yet. And of course, Color of the Supreme King, also known as Conqueror's Haki. Conqueror's Haki is the special kind of Haki that you only get if you have the ambition of a king, so to say. The characters we've for sure seen utilize Conqueror's Haki, or are most likely to have it, are characters with some kind of unshakable, world-altering ambition that drives them forward at every moment. And this takes the form of, at least in Conqueror Haki's most fundamental state, the ability to, essentially force your authority onto others to the point where they are knocked out if they can't meet your ambition. Which, I think it's kind of cool, if a little complicated and under-elaborated on at times. I think it's actually quite interesting how Haki is evocative of the idea of having so much ambition that the world essentially bends in a way to accommodate that. Like with Conqueror's Haki, the idea of forcefully exerting your will onto others enough that they just straight up pass out. That's pretty cool. The idea that you can have so much ambition in a fight that you keep getting up no matter how many times you're hit can unconsciously manifest as Armament Haki protecting you more and more against hits. I think that's really, really, really cool. I really like Armament Haki. And can't go wrong with foresight or clairvoyance as a power. Haki, as this sort of catch-all term for a lot of unexplainable will-based phenomena within One Piece, is a very interesting approach to a power system. It's kind of non-committal almost, with just how vague it can get at times, but I do think that lends itself really well to Oda's writing style, in that he always leaves the door open for more opportunities or ideas if he really chooses so. Out of these three power systems that I went over today, I would say that Nen is still my favorite. I do believe that power systems in general should just consider what Nen does as a basis for building off of what they want to do. I do like when power systems get weird though. I like when they have hyper-specific ability use cases, or when they're consistently written, but maybe they aren't consistently upfront, very show don't tell. I really like when there are multiple power systems in a story, or when one subsection of a power system gets a little more emphasis and is almost on par with everything else. I just think that power systems are really cool, and I just wanted to talk about a few that I really like.